questions, comments? Do we have information on Jotastack?
Right now, it's in a holding pattern because we're waiting for the community is waiting for the draft EIR. There's certainly a lot of stuff that the Alamutsun are doing in the background to gather support. I don't have inside information specific to it, but I imagine they're gearing up for court action if necessary, because you can always challenge these things under CEQA, the California laws involved, but that costs a lot of money, and which is why it's not successful very often, because simply people, and especially indigenous people, don't have those kind of resources to put forward. So we're waiting for the DER to hopefully it will, with lots of people looking at it and picking it apart. Occasionally they make fatal mistakes, or enough mistakes to make it very uncomfortable. If you look at the Shell Mound, West Berkeley Shell Mound fight that's been in Berkeley, that Karina Gould's been going on, it's been going on for years, and they've managed to drag it out by making these people do dot every I, cross every T, follow the letter of the law, prevent them from shortcutting the law, doing everything they can. Now, the reality is that the laws do not support Native people having any rights or power over this. So, for the most part, it comes down to publicly embarrassing these people. That's the reality.
For those of you who are unfamiliar with Protect Jotastock, that is the quarry that is coming in at Sargent Ranch, which is between Gilroy and San Juan Batista, of which is Ama Mutsun Ohlone territory. Ama means people, Mutsun is the language. I am Mutsun of the Indian Kanyon Mutsun Band, and sacred site protection is really important. It is a quarry that is proposing wanting to collect ovular sand from tops of hilltops of that territory. A lot of investors who don't even know the land or care about it, they just care about the profit, are wanting to put money, or actually have put a lot of money into that. So Juristac, Juristac, Google it if you don't know about it. Local indigenous community members trying to stop that.
There was a walk just recently, which was great exercise for me, but I'm not sure how much effect other than externally, but I think it goes to your question about it was a way to build community. So it was actually much more important internally. People coming together, knowing who the people are that you're going to be going into battle with, so to speak. So Native people who are in touch with the traditions understand a different measure of success. Karina Gould years ago brought a group to occupy a place over in Vallejo that they were going to desecrate by paving over, building bathrooms on a park, and it was a sacred landscape. And in the end, they wound up paving a lot of it and putting a park in and with bathrooms. But it wasn't a failure. They didn't reach the goal they objectively tried to reach. But what they did is built a community and a movement, which has led to them forming a land trust, 2 more organizations, and a lot more people being aware. So I don't call that a failure. And I think even in the case where like this, we don't know the outcome yet, but it's not a failure. It's already successful already because it's brought awareness of Ohlone people, of the Mutsun people and their sacred areas still being here and still being valuable and worth saving.
Another question? Him right there.
Yeah, I got here late, so this was covered. Excuse me. But I've read some information about mini ice ages. Okay. Currently, we've had 4 or 5, maybe since the 1400s. They've been documented 1600s, 1800s, et cetera, et cetera. And there are those who suggest that what we're experiencing now, along with these ice ages, apparently anomalies in the weather patterns. But some are suggesting that we're approaching another mini ice age, and I'm wondering, how is it not case, how is it different?
Can we all raise our hands and take a vote that we're not approaching that? I mean, can we just like raise our hand and vote that we're not approaching a mini ice age? Is anybody else wanna? I mean,
That's only 20%, dude. But anyway, I just bring it up. It's just another view of the situation. Is there any validity to what's going on?
From and I'm not an expert, but I know experts, and they're saying it's the opposite.
But even with that, even with these patterns and cycles repeating or not repeating, it's different at this point in time because populace has boomed, and the petroleum industry has created many plastics and multiple, like we think about big ag, we think about big pharma, we think about all of these industries that are polluting and wreaking havoc. But it's not just CO2, it's thinking about the microplastics that are being ingested, it's thinking about the poisons and the multiple plants, animals, and disruption that we are putting in. And so when it comes to the patterns and cycles, even if it's very similar to supposed patterns, it's not the same. So we need more advocates to talk about it.
That one statistic that really stuck out, the one about we're putting out more of these climate changing type chemicals in the atmosphere than were in the last extinction event. Remember that?
Faster. Yeah, I mean, if you just look at basic data on all fronts, CO2, amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, how fast it's been put there, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that kind of question, assuming it's being brought up to talk about people in some stage of denial, it basically reminds me of just a moment ago of you, Kanyon, sharing. On the one hand, you're trying to like go out here and press into new frontiers and reach new people and such, but you have the shackle having to go back and repeat data over and over and over, which is exactly, was your way of saying what Gregg just said, that the data is a given, it's not even worth talking about anymore. Can we please operate in reality and act like we're adults?
You still have your question?
I think one thing I would make is that we the people who were promoting this science, a couple of decades ago, made a big mistake by, allowing it to be named global warming. Because it's variable over the place, and I think that's where some of the idea of mini ice ages come along, because there's going to be shifts in temperature, and they're not always going to be up universally, at least at this point. Some are actually going to go down in certain places. But on balance, the Earth as overall is greatly warming. There's no question about it. Some places will get cold. The Earth is trying to balance, but it's not gonna balance in our favor.
Yeah. This woman had a question. Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like the U.S. population has a hard time thinking about the Arctic, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's far away, what's happening. Have you, I guess this is a question for Dahr, have you thought about, or you write about in your book, the rise of the sea level? Because I'm thinking that that's what's going to impact, perhaps, the rest of the United States most quickly and possibly dramatically, which is a tragedy, but might also be a wake-up call. I'm thinking of Miami, for example, South Florida, Virginia, and parts of Louisiana. And are you seeing that the sea level rise is accelerating as well? Are you about that?
I have a whole chapter on sea level rise, and cutting to the chase, I end that chapter with an interview with Dr. Harold Wanless. He's a sea level rise expert at University of Miami, and he said, essentially said that for every one part per million of CO2 we've added to the atmosphere, there's been historically corresponding a 1 foot sea level rise. We've added 135 parts per million of CO2 to the atmosphere.
Tying into that, I was part of a global planetary health alliance conversation, and Indigenous women of the Arctic and First Nations Canada territories were pointing out that they were taught from hunting and collecting and harvesting that everything is shaping and shifting and drastically changing. Just aunties and uncles of a certain generation are already seeing it totally change. And so from harvesting to tending the land to what was frozen and the permafrost is melting, paying attention to that and recognizing that instead of dismissing it like, oh no, it's this. We need to raise awareness and we need to all recognize this and get on board. But we are all following the agenda that we feel we're powerless because it's a systemic issue that our industrial model of education has taught us that we don't have a voice and we can't stand strong.
And they profit from that. Dahr, maybe you can speak to the elders you talked to up there, but I think part of it from the elders like in the Karuk country, Yurok, up in Northern California, that looking at the river, that seems to be another place where the climate change is very dramatic to them. And I think part of it is our human perception, and part of it's cultural, of time. So if we go to the beach this year and then we go next year, we don't see much change. So it's like, oh, well, then climate change isn't really happening. We don't have the proper perspective. If you go and talk to other people that maybe have been there or they have a different viewpoint, they're going to tell you about lots of changes because your perspective is different and your mind and eye are not trained to detect those differences, sometimes on purpose. You're in denial.
So I have a question, mostly for Dahr. As a journalist, how do you see journalism in general, our major news outlets handling this? I mean, I think this room is very much fire. I mean, I don't think there's very many people in this room who don't believe all of this. So what's your perspective? What's your take? What would you like to see change? I mean, what should we be tuning into, I guess?
Thanks for that. In the last year, we've seen this explosion of awareness across all the media, even the corporate media, about the climate crisis. To see on CNN a debate and then in big letters, behind it, climate crisis, like that's a bit of a coup for awareness comparatively. That said, they're a little late to the party. As we've heard so many different ways, people talking about, particularly indigenous folks like, look, dude, we were sounding the alarms decades and decades and decades ago. And so, I think it's an utter abject failure of the media, including most of the media on the left, to report on this crisis on the level that it deserves. In my perspective, it should be like front page, like, nasty alien invasion headline news, like, because that's where we are, and the response needs to be according to that. And instead, it's we still have 12 years, or vote for Bernie, or and it's like, no, we are in it now. There's no more future tense about it, and we are looking at methane releases as we speak right now in the Arctic. The only question is how big will they get and how much faster does that happen, and wait and see, it's coming. So it's I'm at a point, I just quit journalism. I just stepped out. The outlet that I write for is going to announce it any day now. And I'm in that place that both of these people just spoke to, that I mentioned earlier, that like, look, it's time to keep moving forward and what's really, really important. And for me, it's going into a different kind of writing that's going to basically come a lot more in alignment with exactly what these two folks have been talking about all night, because we don't need more data. The house is on fire. We don't need to keep sitting here pointing at it and trying to tell everybody the house is on fire, especially those that don't want to believe it. Like, I want to get with people who are actually, talking about the truth and working towards a better way of being on the planet. And from that place, we can decide where to go. But yeah, the media, even most of it on the left, I think is an abject failure to this day on the level of crisis that's upon us.
It reminds me of an elder who they were talking about politics, and they were saying, are you, liberal, or are you, conservative, or are you Democratic? So it's like, you really think, to me as an indigenous person, there's a difference? It's minute degrees. He used the term. He says you're all insane. That's what he said. That's his opinion, and there's very little difference between all of them. Just slight shades of color. That's about it.
So I officially want the conversation to continue. However, I am going to abide by Western Settler Colonial Time and officially let you know that it is 9. So there is the thank you, and I think we may want to continue talking if we want to, but this will be the formal, okay, thank you. Yeah, I know. That's what she said.
I'm going to say, okay, thank you, and keep going.
Exactly. So this is the official thank you. We're following all the rules, and let's keep going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So if you have to leave, go ahead. Thank you for being here. And for those who want to stay, we have a question right here.
That there's been a lot of information coming specifically from Native people for many, many decades that has not been listened to and the science is not catching up. I'm wondering if any of you see any potential avenues for increasing that dialogue and that recognition from Native people through the media, the policymakers, et cetera, going forward.
I'll hand it to Kanyon here in a minute, but I think part of it is that it actually is happening, and I think because we're not seeking attention for the most part. There are some people that are, and I don't mean that necessarily bad way. It's just that we're focused on the work. So the fact that the media doesn't know that we're talking to people, that we're on panels at climate change, in environmental, in conferences, that's happening. So we're making direct connections with people rather than doing it through the media. That's another avenue, but that's not necessarily our interest or expertise. So that's my perception that it is happening, but at a very low, quiet level. That's having an effect directly with people that can have a more direct effect than us.
That is a common struggle, so it has been happening. So hashtag Native Twitter, amazing one. Oh, the question is, we are seeing so we are hearing that indigenous peoples have been talking about this, raising awareness, and have been sharing this narrative of this ongoing work. Now, how is it that we could possibly raise awareness or help bring that to the surface or get a bit more involved, right? Okay, something of that sort. Brain. I was answering it. I was like, no, restate it. So hashtag Native Twitter, awesome. But the issue is similar. Well, as a Native person, I kind of make the parallel to vampires. We don't enter until we've been welcomed in. We don't want to colonize or take over and say, you need to hear this. And at the same time, when people come, they have to know better. They have to know how to ask. Well, you didn't ask. And so it's relationship building. And then it's capacity. If we're doing the work, there's no time to be extra and do extra, such as marketing. I'm not a good writer. I'm a great talker. And I don't have time to go to a class to go get better at writing. I want to network with people who can advocate towards that. And it's opening space. So i.e., what is your relationship with the Native community or the inspirational material of Native communities of which you can utilize your position to advocate for raising awareness and helping that narrative get out there? And so sometimes it's resharing, sometimes it's financially contributing, sometimes it's writing that article. Any of y'all writers want to write about this event? Please do so and send it my way. I would love to share it on my platform. And trust me, I got a lot of followers, and they share and share and share and and that helps raise clout and awareness. So that is part of it. And raising awareness has been going on for a while. Yeah, just being of assistance, being dedicated to the community.
In my experience, the Native people that are doing the real work, you're not gonna hear much about them. That's the point. They're not focused on it. They don't want it. They are vampiric in that they don't want the spotlight on them. They don't want the sunlight on them because that's not the point. Well, in our terms, it's lack of ego. Our ego is not tied up into it. It's not about what I'm going to do. It's about what needs to be done and who's going to do it. And if somebody else can do it better, do it. And that's the advantage of having a community that validates you in very different ways, but are even more important ways than the usual, spotlight and getting recognition, verbally. They just know, you have people behind you, so you don't have to worry about getting validated. You just have to worry about doing the work. So I think, again, a lot of that stuff is happening. You're just not hearing about it, but certainly we could do more. the other part too is, she shared a little bit of her struggles as a personal person. That's across Indian country. We're, like you say, we're still dealing with first contact, and we still have a lot of internal trauma that we have to work out with one hand, while the other hand we have to save the world.
So may I add to the conversation about awareness, please? Basically, just for disclosure, I'm an advocate here for my 9 grandchildren who are younger than Greta Thunberg and don't know about any of this stuff. But the other question in my mind is there's just a few small percentage of the student population here, and given the gravity of the information that Dahr has shared from what he's gathered from the scientists, it seems to me that the place to start is right here in making sure that every new student that comes in is aware of the situation so they can be emotionally prepared for it, so they can understand what their future may look like to them based on what their interpretation of it is, and they can make good choices for themselves. And so I recall when our daughter went from high school to university, there was a big list of books that she was going to need to read, and then at the beginning of her university career, there were symposiums to discuss what those books were, and they were basically about problems that might relate to climate disruption, but other things about events taking in the world that were health and stuff like that. So why not use this one place where students are going to come in, maybe bring them in a week earlier, and they're discussing information that may be backed in the back of their mind and they're not aware of it. But I think this is important enough that they have a right to know about it, and they have a right to make a decision on what their future should look like. And I think it probably starts at an institution like this, because the media isn't going to take that much time to do it.
Tying into that educational system and how we go about becoming informed, when I don't gravitate to my own generation and these younger generations. There are kids that are waking up and becoming familiar. However, a lot of us are complacent, and I totally blame the Western settler colonial industry of industrialized education system, reading, writing, arithmetic, but we don't prioritize interpersonal relationship building, we don't prioritize introspection, we don't prioritize communal and reciprocal energies, we don't prioritize accountable measures of how we impact each other, but not just humans. We don't talk about that. We build little consumers. We are of a capitalistic industry. The Western settler colonial narrative is spiritually, morally, and ethically bankrupt. It is based on resource extraction, capitalization, consumeristic nation, disposable society, of which is devoid of any accountability or reciprocity to these living systems. And we need to break that entire system. But the hard part is everyone's just like, but this is how we do things. We have to follow these rules. We have to maintain this occurrence. And so I feel like a crazy person saying we need to break it all.
Yeah.
I noticed someone way over there.
I'll just add to it. In every single class I speak to, not just stands, but any class I speak to, when they ask me, well, what can I do? I say, as this gentleman is, educate yourself. And the second thing, form a community. Because what she said is we're creating little consumers. We're creating individual consumers. And that is what keeps us in our place. When we form bonds of relationships and community, and we aren't afraid of being intimate with each other, and I don't mean in a physical way, I mean in an emotional, spiritual way, because that's where real intimacy happens, then our power is much greatly amplified than just having 2 people together or 5 people together. It's much greater than that. And the system knows that and reacts to it by keeping us as much as it possibly can as individuals. That's why tribal communities survived genocide, even though 95% of us were wiped out, and we still survived that with a lot of wounds, but we're still here, and it's because we held on to the tattered remains of our communal relationships.
as in
What about the role of groups, civil disobedience groups like XR? That's why I brought it up a couple times during my talk. I think it's a fabulous way to go out and start doing something exactly what Kanyon was just talking about. Is the system has to be broken. It has to be stopped. Like business as usual can't continue. So, I mean, as far as people who are looking for a particular action or group to get involved with and start building community with, that's a good idea, I think.
she's got good eyes. Corner.
No, that's you.
Well, on top of opening space, taking on the labor of being an ally, so educating other people of those other things, i.e., LGBTQ and women's rights, and all of this patriarchal system is offset it. So raise awareness, start working on those, having women's circles, having our intertribal or intercommunal, our LGBTQ, our two-spirit circles, and having our men's circles to break down toxic masculinity, to open space for multicultural, multi-diverse communities. And I just started talking about this to a friend, and I sat there saying, I'm thinking about all of those wasted hours that I went to school, seeing all the students having to meet the criterion of a final project, of which just only was spent hours just to present some material on something that is interesting to them. However, when you present it, it just gets thrown in something, it's a saved file, it doesn't do anything. I'm like, think about all of that creative energy from elementary all the way to middle school to high school to college students, all of that creative energy, that motivated energy, even if there were not so grand ideas, doing something. What is something your city needs? What is something your community needs? What is an educational outreach? What is something that your final project can do that benefits something else beyond getting a good grade? So all of that creative energy can go somewhere else beyond meeting the criterion of that class. Still meet the criterion, so you still get the public speaking stuff, so you still get do the report thing, but set the criterion as it needs to benefit the community somehow. Just that, just creative energy. So introspection, communal building, breaking systems, and reprioritizing the energy being spent into something productive.
I think what I see that is hopeful about the young kids, I'm thinking of my granddaughter, who's pretty ornery. I won't tell her that, but I'm kind of proud of it, though, even if it's frustrating. But and that's what needs to happen. I think you have to build a youth group, a youth population that challenges the system directly in whatever way they can. So in this case, rather than wait for the system, go make the system work for you. So go to your classrooms, go to your administration and say, why aren't we having these people, not just indigenous, but these people come and talk to us? Because it's not, these are not textbooks. These are people working on this issue directly, have the direct knowledge. These are the experts. How
living
come
libraries.
So how come living libraries. Why aren't we having access to them? And if they won't do that in the classroom, well then advocate for things like this that are a little bit outside and maybe it can happen. And if you have to, take it off the campus and make it happen. So that's one way you can do it locally where, again, I've been taught to not worry about direct immediate effect. Like I do something today and I have to see the result tomorrow. I just put the seed out, and if I don't have time to watch it grow, well then, I'll come back sometime later, somebody else will tell me about it, and I'll go do some other things. But I know they did the right thing, and if I do it often enough, things will gradually start happening, because it's never going to be the one light switch you turn on that lights up the whole world. There's lots of light switches. There's lots of things that have to be done. Yes, protesting is important. Some people don't like to protest. That's okay. Some people don't like reading draft environmental impact reports. That's what I sometimes do, because I do that as a service community. And then I get the other people go do the protesting, walks, whatever. So we need all those people on board with all the different skills and things that they can do. So, my big thing is do the right thing for you is doing something. And everybody has to do something, and everybody can do something.
Multifaceted approach. Furthest in the back on that side.
In your opinion, what does it mean to be educated?
To realize that there is more that you don't know than what you do. And continuing, being open and willing to bring in more information. One thing that I point out is there are many times that many of us are entering a space or a state that we, up until a certain point, we didn't know what we didn't know. And so once we learn, or once that information has come into our life, it's how we go forward with that information. And so we could either walk forward negligently and act like we didn't hear it and then do horrible, atrocious things, or simple, terrible things. But you knew better. And it's what you do going forward, because you can remain ignorant only until the point of that occurrence. And then how you go forward is how you walk. And if we want to be accountable and respect what that information is brought into our life, it's what we're doing going forward. Because, we can't do anything about the past.
I would also say that if you think you're done with your education, you're probably in your coffin. And, Daryl, Dr. Wilson, decided to go back to school after he only had a GED at the age of 40, and he had 2 one-year-old twins as a single parent. So he did what everybody does in that situation. They went back to college with a GED, and it took him 15 years, and he got a PhD.
And they did hurt with that. So they recognized that he was mostly a student before being that kind of parent. But they respect it because I see them as adults, and they're amazing.
I would also say that about the education system, that we have this paradigm of you can only have one thought in a singularity about something. So when I trash the education system, they think, well, I'm totally against education. No, it's a tool. I don't like the way that tool is formed, and I don't like the way it's being used. So let's change the tool, let's sharpen it, let's use it a different way. That's what I'm saying. And Daryl knew this. He talked about his elders sent him back to school. And he wanted to get education, and the elders said, go back and learn to use their words the way they use them against us, but don't become like them. So that taught him, it's like, well, this is just information. It's data, it's tool. Treat it like that, but use it in a good way based on your own cultural, ethical values.
Could you connect what you saw happening in the Middle East, in Iraq, with what you saw happening regarding climate disruption? Is that a connection that you talk about in the book, or you are going to talk about?
I can't remember if I talk about it in the book, but I think it's really what both Kanyon and Gregg have already talked about, and me at least cursorily, is that it's all Wetiko. I mean, it's all symptomatic, and they're both just different symptoms of the same disease, which is the disease of cannibalism. That it's okay, which is literally now consuming the planet enough to the point where the perpetrators are now facing the reckoning as well. I mean, they always were, but now it's grossly obvious, even like the hyper rich, your money's not going to protect you, this is on all of us now. So it's like, welcome to their world, right? For everybody. So the invasion and occupation of Iraq, what the U.S. empire has done across the globe, the climate crisis. I mean, the climate crisis, in a sense, is like the final last act of Wetiko as far as egregious symptoms, if you will. That's the way. But they're all symptoms of the same disease, and that's why it's, I think, like when I share that story of stands of people like Dr. Wilson and the others coming into the class and just saying, right here, man, right here, because this is where it started, and this is where the cure has to start here now, on an individual basis, in community.
You have to start with yourself.
Hello, this question's for Dahr. So my name's Alex Londos. I also went to Iraq a few years ago, and I've been to 18 countries in the last 5 years doing humanitarian missions, environmental projects, or disaster relief work. I remember going to Nepal maybe 4 years ago, and they were also telling in the U.S. because they were had a lot of U.S. knowledge. And it's not just indigenous people, it's so many people around the world are being affected by these climate disruptions. And it's really unfortunate that it's taken us so long in the U.S. And so my question, just to get on the same page and the same level, because I've been doing climate research for the last 15, 17 years. I also wrote a book about it, and I studied it extensively. So when in the past I've educated people about global warming and climate change, and obviously those weren't good terms, and I tried to tell them about all the disruptions. It was going to affect our civilization regardless. Our infrastructure just isn't strong, and it's not designed for the climate disruptions we're seeing as far as the global heat waves and food shortages and everything else. I mean, we're not like built this resilient, especially since we've built so many cities along coastal regions around the world. So when I try to convey this message to people about the urgency of climate change and like that we don't have 12 years, I've seen Bernie now 7 times. I actually even spoke with his wife a month ago for 2 or 3 minutes. I pulled her aside, and why is Bernie telling people that we have 12 years? We don't have 12 years. These are happening. I'm constantly trying to emphasize that urgency. So so my question to you is, when we continue to see global heat waves and global forest fires, when cities burn like we saw in Northern California, when we continue to see rising ocean sea levels and more chemical fires like we saw a few days ago at oil refineries, and more plastic pollution, and all these positive feedback loops continue to happen with environmental degradation and animal species and insect populations down and everything. So what's your take on the percentage of people that are going to survive this? Because I don't think there's a way, unless you're a billionaire and you have a multi-million-dollar bunker, you're not going to last more than a few years. So these people that are prepping, these like small little makeshift bunkers and stuff, I wish all of that money would be directed towards sustainable technologies and renewable energy and resources. I mean, do you think that we're going to be at like a 99% extinction rate, and only, or do you think that we're at a 97, 90? I mean, when it comes to all of the chemicals and the pollution and complete collapse of our infrastructure.
I have no idea. I think that my personal just analysis and perspective, and this is only my personal opinion, based on all, looking at all the different systems that I looked at in the book and how fast sea level rise is happening and what's in store and what's baked into the oceans. And right. So I without a doubt, I can't see how billions of people are not going to die sooner rather than later. Full stop. Every coastal city on the planet is gone.
No matter what we do.
No matter what we do. Well, and that's, let me finish, please. So around the time when I met Stan, I was absolutely for sure 100% certain, no way not one human being survives, full stop. And I would have debated you, and I did try to debate Stan on this until I turned blue. And I still maintain, as I just said, I think there's no way around the fact that the global population is going to be reduced dramatically sooner rather than later. Like, nature the planet's been sending us these warning signs for a long time, and they have been ignored and ignored and ignored. And so as nature does, nature will get things back in balance itself. And so, but I also have learned that I have to have enough humility to say that as bleak as things look, we've never been here before, and who knows? There were a couple of stories that were brought to my attention. Again, thank you, Stan. That, for example, there was an area where I think it was somewhere in California where rattlesnakes were basically being annihilated because someone got bit and people wanted to hike there. Oh, we got to get rid of these routes. So they went in and literally tried to just obliterate them from an area. And within 2 generations, they started to be born to grow up and not have rattles. So that's pretty amazing adaptation in nature, and that flies in the face of all science and evolution and all of this. Like, that's like lightning fast adaptation. Yes. So we don't know. That's my point. Am I saying, and then people, oh, you're like this hoper now, and like, humans or civilization is going to pull through. Like, no, I think we are going into a dark age. Like, it's an age of loss. Billions of people are about to leave the planet sooner rather than later. Personally, I think probably well before 2050, well before. And you look at shifting rainfall patterns and what's happening to soils and everything right now across the planet. I mean, things are happening fast. I mean, I'm amazed that we're not already seeing it more egregiously in the West. I mean, so I have a friend of mine who's a farmer in Australia. I talked to him last week, and he says, look, mate, we're going in, and then he has a big farm, and he says, we are on the front end of summer. And right now I have a friend with 850 cattle 2 hours to the west of me. He wants to get them to market to try to get something. They're too weak to walk up the ramp of the transport truck. So he's spending $50,000 to fatten them up to try to get them to a place. I'm sorry, it wasn't to a market. It was to another place where he could maybe get feed for them. There's no feed. Parts of the country are already dust. The soil's blowing away where they were farms. And that's happening right now. In another place, he's like, here's this other friend who just had to literally kill off over 1,000 of his cattle because there's no place to put them. The market's saturated. Everybody's already sold their cattle. There's no more feed, et cetera. So this is happening right now. And this is like coming soon to a country near you. And that's in like the so-called developed world where, there's still transport systems to get food to market, et cetera, in place, unlike other parts of the world that are already living in this kind of post-apocalyptic scenario. So anyway, I've gone on way too long, but, the short version is, I think a whole lot of people are about to leave the planet really soon. And, but if anything, that just underscores that moral obligation piece of what is the next right thing for me to do, because it's the moral thing to do. Because even if this is the last act of humans and we're only around for another 10 or 20 more years, in 20 years, if I'm still here and there's someone younger that's, what did you do in 2019 where there was still summer sea ice in the Arctic and there was still, Antarctica or Greenland was still largely intact. I want to just be able to say that I did the right thing. And that's kind of selfish, but it also happens to be the right thing to do, in my opinion. So it just keeps coming back to that moral obligation that no matter how bleak things look, and they look effing bleak, then of all times, do I want to go out on my feet with integrity and dignity and still trying to be of service or not? Basically it comes down to what kind of person do you want to be.
Go ahead.
Dahr, this question is for you. So you said that you were trying to move away from journalism, and I'm wondering if you want to give a little bit of insight into where you feel like your writing is going next.
Yeah. So there were several things that happened to move out of journalism, and the short version of the story is that this is everything I have to say, and I'm done. And we don't need more information, as Gregg said. We know what's happening, and not just with climate disruption, but pick your poison of whatever you're involved in working on. So, but me personally, I am going into writing, hopefully, just books and essays. I don't know, Stan, how much should we talk about this? So Stan and I are working on a proposal for a project of where we're going to highlight indigenous voices from different walks of life, different perspectives about indigenous reaction and perspectives to the crisis of climate disruption. And that's a book. To me, that's the only thing that makes sense to do for me personally, and the only thing that I want to do.
I think we had one in the back first, and then him. But that one.
Yeah, so I think it's for the full, my question is for the full panel, and I also just want to share a little bit of information about what's happening locally. So I'm part of Extinction Rebellion and also Rebellion Health and Deep Adaptation Network in Syracuse. And so it's for anyone who's leaving this room feeling, anxious or, feeling like they need to talk to somebody about what they've learned tonight, please look up Positive Deep Adaptation on Facebook and let's connect. We're trying to build community.
Well, if you that's a hard one. If you have a leadership, and it's not going to stay static, it's going to grow. But as you grow the leadership, they have to work internally to set up a foundation and a clear ethical, moral framework to work in, and be very clear about that, bluntly clear about it, so that anybody coming in won't have any question about what you're doing and what you're about. And I think that those fundamentals are part of what's missing in the panic that we're in now, by not going back to the fundamentals that are going to sustain us through whatever we're going to go through. So I think in terms of making a community, that's the most important thing. And I know this, having experienced it a number of times in forming communities or reforming communities, our tribal communities, on both my mother and my father's side. And it's not going to be easy. It's not going to even always be fun, but it's going to be fulfilling. And you're going to make mistakes and learn from the mistakes, but headed towards that goal of a fundamental framework of what a community should be, of what your community wants to be. And then let people decide by that clarity whether they want to join you or not. And if not, maybe you have a relationship with another community. It's like, well, maybe you should, that would be better for you. Not to throw them out, but just to say that's where you'll find your balance is over there. Here, we're going to do this. And I think that is going to be, we're so focused on success in the wrong terms and the wrong sense. And I think much more success, because I'm more with Dahr about my great-great-grandkids may not be here. But what about my great-grandkids? What about my grandkids that are teenagers? There's something we can do for them. Even if they have to endure these really harsh realities that are coming their way, there's still something worth life and living it in a good way, that they can be fulfilled. I think that's what the elders, like Daryl taught me, is like we have to redefine what colonized civilization has supposedly civilized us to, in terms of what really is meaningful. It's not success in terms of jobs and cars and material objects. That should be obvious, but we don't live that out, even if we say it. And that goes for me too. We're still caught up in that matrix. So the way we start slowly breaking it out, because it's not going to happen fast. We didn't get here fast. We're not going to get out of it fast. And of course the question is, will we get out fast enough? That's still an open question. But you still want to do it, because I think it's the right thing to do. That's what's been drilled into me. It doesn't matter if we're not going to succeed. I mean, I think if you talk to people who are terminal illness, and some decide, I'm going to fight for every moment. That's good. That's their balance. That's what they need to do. Other people are going, no, I'm going to enjoy my life and live however it is. And sometimes they live for a long time. My great aunt was like that. They told her, quick story, my great aunt was discovered with cancer. Now, I don't know how this happened, but her husband, my great uncle, just convinced the doctor not to tell her that she had cancer. I don't ask, but she did not know she had cancer. She outlived her husband and two of her younger sisters, and passed away the day after her 86th birthday, where she had a party and got drunk. I mean, and it sounds like that's a happy story, in a sense, because she had a joy of life and purpose and a family that loved her dearly. And that's what community is about. So if you want to, it's not about being successful or fighting off global climate. I think those are such grandiose goals. Start small. How about living just a good life that you enjoy and fulfills you? And that can be in a very small, tight community. I don't think you can do it by yourself. You have to have a community of some sort.
Mm-hmm. And tying into that, when building a community and grounding yourself, recognizing the systems of how you came to be and where you come from. So recognizing that you're on occupied, stolen land, and try and become familiar with those histories of that space. Recognizing your community members and their diverse narratives, of which It's important to connect to as a community, and there are diverse perspectives. So thinking about the systems of oppression and the internal bias, that like implicit bias that we carry in the world, breaking apart those and witnessing ways that we can come together with the common values. So when coming together, finding like all of these patterns, I'm lucky enough to be working with a woman who I was just a consultant for, and she has given me a title of being a co-author, but she's doing Decolonizing Anti-Racist Culture of the European Diaspora. And she wants to create resources and a network of information, and I'm really excited about it. And in that, the goals are so beautiful, and it's like the value systems of a community that I really want to be involved with, because it doesn't feel like they're tokenizing like my consultation skills. They're actually saying, no, we want to bridge and connect. And so in being a resource for the community, talking and opening those doors, and then hearing them and seeing them in their authentic view, and then in their inquiry of seeking you out where your common values are, but having that rooted understanding of what your community values are, your mission, your goals, and the uncomfortable conversations. Because today we have a polarized, we have just a polarized political climate of this conversation of othering, of like, fine, if you don't agree with me, I'm going to leave the room, or I'm not going to work with you, or I'm going to tell people to boycott you. And it's like, how about we start practicing and working those muscles out about having those difficult conversations, because we are replicating the disposable society. We're replicating the behaviors of people being disposable, and that doesn't help things. I understand like self-protection, all that fun stuff. I do understand that, and yes, some people have to set their boundaries that way. However, if there's difficult conversations of like, you like that flavor and I like that, but we still share this common goals of like, we care about the quality of the water, let's start envisioning what a system or practice or procedure or what restorative justice looks like when those difficult conversations come to the surface, so you don't have that internal combustive breaking apart energy. So rooting and finding that connection is my input.
Hi. First, I just want to thank you guys for coming out and sharing your words of wisdom and staying extra to hear our questions. Something I picked up on is you guys are talking a lot about the inclusion of perspectives on any decision-making process. And something I found is the learning of new languages is a great way to get a different perspective, just because it really limits the way you can describe things. I was wondering, do you guys have any thoughts on that? Like, should we learn languages? And for those who know multiple ones, is there any insight you could give me on how specifically that has changed your way of communicating?
I'm a shameless plug. I'm relearning my indigenous language. Now, the Mutsun dialect, right? Now, this is something that's also a trend of capitalism. How many of you recognize this symbol, live long and prosper? Live long and prosper is of the Klingon and Vulcan community. That is a language that was created by a gentleman named Mark Okrand. Mark Okrand went to school at UCSC and Berkeley. He got his PhD in the Mutsun language, in the Mutsun dialect, of which he did tap into his own intellectual property rights, his own creative energy, and created this amazing alien language of which thousands of people study. And they have marriages and books and stories in them. Do they know that this person studied California indigenous languages? Do they know that he learned how the foundation of a language that follows its rules and its focus, unlike English, which is a predatory language, take a little this, take a little that, oppress and change and not follow all the rules? Do they know that? Did you raise your hand if you just learned that Mark Okrand got his PhD in the Mutsun language? Okay, yeah, exactly. Majority of the room. So, not following indigenous pedagogies of reciprocal relationship building. And then with language, I'm realizing, reconnecting to my own family's language, I'm realizing that it is how I think. I'm reawakening ways that I've like, oh my gosh, this helps me because it's more familiar, even though I don't know it. And witnessing community members who are multilingual and who have a diverse way of sharing knowledge and bringing in data, it's beautiful. Like, I'm I like to geek out and watch movies in the either in the dubbed English version with the subtitles on and the CC on, because I like to see the cultural narrative shift. Because if the subtitles are written by the community who wrote it, then tried to translate it to English, they put their cultural context in there. And then when you have it dubbed in English in American English, you hear the cultural connotations that are different. Like, well, let's say just like something American, like, are you shitting me? Versus, let's say, a little more European or like British humor, are you taking a piss? And so other cultures have different norms like that are all social. And then thinking neurodivergent, some community members don't catch that social innuendo. And so I definitely appreciate multi-language approaches because there is another layer of empathy or connection to the diverse way we communicate. And it's beautiful.
I'll take a slightly different angle. I'm not sure. I think to achieve the same effect that learning a different language would give you in terms of perspective, I think there are other ways. So if that's what you want to do, that's fine. I wouldn't necessarily say you have to. And the reason we do it is because, like she said, it's specific to our culture and the way we were raised, even if we didn't realize it, we weren't conscious of it. You know, I learned early on when I was doing tribal documentation work in the 90s, we would ask our elders, you know, what do they know about growing up Indian, you know? And they go, oh, well, I don't know nothing. And outside cultural anthropologists had to come and work with us to ask the right questions in the right way to understand that they did know a lot. They just didn't know they knew it. So there's a lot of cultural, social context in it. And there's some things that just don't translate well. And that's why we almost and to really understand our culture, we have to learn at least some aspects of the language. It's not just for the mechanics of what it might do to our brain and the way we view the world. It's the way we culturally relate to words specifically because of our language. So, you know, if my language wasn't documented to the point where I could bring it back, I wouldn't choose to learn somebody else's indigenous language. Just to get that mechanics, I think there's other ways to do that. So I think the goal you're talking about of having a different perspective, of viewing the world in a very different way, Daryl taught me that without teaching me any of his language. He used English. It was a poor substitute, but he taught me how alien our ancestors thought. They were Klingonish kind of alien in the way they view the world in a very different way. And the more he taught me, it's like, oh my God, I'm never going to get there. And it's probably true. I won't be able to get there because I'm too wrapped up in this world the way it is. But there's a lot I can learn. And the best way for me is to learn my own language from one of my families, not necessarily Serbo-Croatian or Latin or some other obscure language just for the mechanical part of it. So if you have a background in a particular language, you have elements within your family, whether you know it or not, that you can hook into by learning that language. But I think if you don't have that, there are other ways you can train your mind to view the world differently that are much easier and more fun than learning language. Because believe me, language learning is not fun. It's incredibly intense work.
If you did experience trauma while you were in Iraq, what coping mechanisms have you used since then to help, I guess, strengthen yourself or heal yourself?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Actually, we being you and I before this started. So I talked about dealing with PTSD, and Stan actually uses the term post-colonial stress disorder alongside that, which all of us suffer from, and PTSD. And so yeah, I got pretty severe PTSD working as a journalist in Iraq, both primary and secondary PTSD. And community was a critical component of that. And I'm not meaning to talk about it past tense because it's you have it forever once you get it. And I've been learning to dance with it in a new way very recently with some other issues coming up around it. But when I came back, it was particularly acute, and I was like a lot of people. I could feel nothing except rage. And so therapy played a big role. Doing grief workshops with Joanna Macy, that kind of work, the work that reconnects, was critical. Having friends and people I could talk to about it, it was more helpful to actually talk with people who also had it. And then a big thing was getting a dog. Literally having a dog, having a different being that communicated in a different way. That was huge, and continues to. And now I have another dog in my life, so that's extremely helpful too. So those are things. And then also, like I talking about this book, was going out being on the earth. And for me, my favorite place is the mountains. And so when I go out into the mountains, all that just goes away, because I'm just connected deep into the is. And I know my right place, and I feel that awe and really revel in the majesty of this amazing planet that we're part of. And that's a giant elixir as well.
NDD is a legitimate mental disorder, nature deficit disorder.
And I would say it's because that's a relationship is essential to living. Because we, as Native people, we consider what you call nature as a living being as well. And it's a fundamental relationship that we have been severed from, some of us forcibly, and we spend a lot of time rebuilding and reinforcing that relationship again and healing it. And that helps a lot of our people. And it's amplified greatly when we do it as a community, when we go out to the land, as natural as it can be, like at Indian Canyon, and do it as a community. It's not just 1 + 1. It's it's not 2 + 2. It's 2 to the second power.
And time.
We had.
Well, I'm going to answer that one too.
Oh, go ahead.
How you like going to the mountains and stuff, and in my class I've been reading about Miss Misa, and I really like that reading. I was just going to ask, how many times have you visited Oxygen or Miss Misa, and is it like healing when you go?
Before I take that, you wanted to comment on that other one?
Oh, no worries. Yeah, I wanted to hear it too. But tying into when we are suffering these issues, it's a byproduct of how we recognize Western settler science. Science that we know today, scientific theory, breaks apart, puts together, figure out how it operates. It barely ever gets a chance to study holistic systems and how holistic systems impact other systems, of which, when we think about medicine today is to help you get better from something that is wrong. I call this my medicine. Music is medicine. Song is medicine. Ceremony is medicine. These are holistic systems of which bring a lot of value and quality into life and livelihood. How many rituals or ceremonies have you had in your life? I know that I'm blessed and privileged to be able to say that has been like a constant in my life. And tying into that, I recognize that we are suffering being byproducts of a capitalistic, consumeristic society. And so when I see non-Native people gravitating to Native spirituality, I really honestly believe it's their ancestors calling them home to that indigenous lineage. Because all of us, if we recognize that we all have indigenous elders and communities from the land that they've always been from. Even if you are mixed, you have indigenous lineages from all of those places. When you reconnect with your ancestors and reconnect with those teachings, and then go forward with accountable action, and connect and recognize that we can bring in these ceremonies and rituals and practices. Because we need that. We need these coming-of-age ceremonies. We need these adult entering elderhood ceremonies. We need young men to become men, young women to become women, our Two-Spirit community members celebrated and respected for the integral role they have in their community, to recognize that it's not just binary, but having all these opportunities to connect, that is a way that we can thoroughly connect. And so tying into like needing nature and connecting to these places and spaces, recognizing the power in those spaces. It's beautiful, but we also humble ourselves in recognizing that there's wisdom in all those places that have always been stewarded by indigenous nations. So, yeah, tie that in.
I think that, to me, because I talked with Daryl a lot about Akoyet, And but I think what he was really saying is what she was saying about that your ancestors are calling you. So it's this idea of, and they use those terms mainly because of English. When he said, you know, Miso is the power of the universe or power of the world is centered in Akuyet. And if he heard a similar story from another indigenous culture bearer talking about the power of the world being in another place, he wouldn't deny that. Because in our viewpoint, we're taught about the multiplicity of truths, and they don't cancel each other out. And that's a dramatic difference with our, Euro-American culture, that there's got to be somebody at the king of the mountain, king, and only one truth, and everybody else is wrong. And you must believe what I believe. And I don't think that's what Daryl intended with that. I think he was talking about what it meant to him, and other people can share and appreciate that and respect that, and they could find their own Akoyet and their own Miso. I mean, my people, I know that story well because he told it to me, and we talked about it, and yet he also knows I have my own place called Stat Yokale, south of Big Sur in the San Lucia Mountains. And that's where the center of our world is. And that's equally valid, and he understood that. So it's really about finding your place of origin, where your power is. I think that's the real part of that story that's important.
So something like what you said too about like, I don't know what as someone who was born in America, like I don't view myself as an American, and I say this like every day, like my teachers like told me to come here, people are very fun now, but like I fight them on, being taught English and punctuation and all that all the time. I tell them I'm going to fight them on the rules because I don't believe in any of them, and I'm going to find the flaws in all of them. And I do feel like my ancestors like are calling me, and I have been seeking wisdom because I need to be healed, and like nothing was helping me. And I actually had my therapist tell me today that when he was kind of in my shoes and going to Cabrillo, he came to something like this and had native speakers talk, and it's been on an app since. So that was very good for me to hear early on today, and you guys have been sharing openly, and I have been getting out of depression, and now that I'm awakened, like waking up to all this on top of life and having to like get into school and all of that, it's a lot, and I am having a crisis in life, but I'm learning that, like you guys said, like you have to kind of shed the data.
Right.
And I don't know, I really don't know, but I just know I need to get back to like the roots and back to like what really matters and like that.
So now I think I'm going to say something a little cautionary, because Ken and I have been walking in some different paths that a lot of the Native people won't go. We've been dealing with New Age and pagan communities the last several years, and trying to address issues of cultural appropriation and some other things. Their community has changed for the better, but there's still a lot of people there that believe what they believe, but we know it's not valid. I'll put it that way. So how that would relate to you is that we know a lot of people are on a path just like yours. They're also in a lot of pain. And when you're in pain, you want the pain to go away. And sometimes the first thing you grasp onto that gives you some relief, you latch onto it. And I would encourage you to just be wise to that. Might not be the truth that's needed for you. That there are people out there that sometimes unconsciously, because it's feeding their own need, and sometimes consciously because they're vampires, will see that in you and latch onto you. And I've seen this a lot in that community. There's a lot of good people, a lot of truth seekers, a lot of truth tellers, and then there's those that are not and will take advantage of you. So that's the cautionary tale. Be patient. Think about it. Don't just latch on to whatever truth is given to you. And I think that's what we're seeing in the political realm right now. A lot of people are afraid. They're in pain. They're in some kind of emotional suffering, spiritual suffering, and they're latching on to something that they think is going to relieve it, and it's very temporary, and in the end, it's going to burn them. So I have compassion for them in the middle of trying to fight against it, because it's going to kill us. And that's what I see a lot in this. Daryl said something else to me. He talked about, because he talked very harshly about the system. being morally, spiritually, ethically bankrupt. That's what he told me. He said the elders told him that, and he believed it. And actually, I do too. I agree with it. But this came from his elders. They saw this, they witnessed it, they experienced it. But he made a distinction with people. People are hurting. People latch out sometimes when they're hurting. So you have to be careful, but you have to have compassion for them. Because this is like wounded 2-year-olds that we're dealing with. That's how a lot of our elders deal with Euro-American culture and colonialism. These are 2-year-olds. They're just big, hairy, strong, dangerous 2-year-olds, but they're acting emotionally like 2-year-olds. And they can cause a lot of damage in that process. But there also has to be compassion within that, because at some point they might wake up, and as individuals, I certainly have compassion for them, because a lot of these people have been totally duped, and they've allowed themselves to be duped because they're looking for their pain to go away. Because they feel so alone, and here this false prophet is giving them the sense of community that's like, paper molecule thin. Go ahead.
I have something that kind of ties into that. Just for people who, one of you said before that we all have indigenous going back, and the people who have mixed heritages, who, you can connect to the different past cultural indigenous ways of each one of those parts of your mixed heritage. And then I have seen a lot that's being said about appropriation and about like eclectic spirituality and stuff like that. I'm just wondering if you guys have anything to say about that, because that feels really confusing to me. It's like, how do you connect with various parts of your own heritage without like feeling like you're also being accused of being like eclectically spiritual and just taking what you're.
That's some of what Kanyon and I have been working on actually the last couple of years, and there's quite a well-known conference that happens every year in February. Next February it's going to be the last one. It's Pantheon.
Last one organized by.
Yeah, the way it is, they may morph into something else, but it's where pagans and New Age people come together, and we've been gently trying to nudge them. I mean, we don't go in there and proselytize them. We just say, here's the truth we know. These are people that say they respect Native American spirituality and cultural values, and the first thing I tell them is there's no such thing as Native American.
We're not a monolithic culture.
So to back to address your question, you can connect to all those different parts of you, but culturally Native people who come from different family lines wind up aligning with just one. They don't forget all the others, but politically, socially, they're in one group. They're in one culture. That's their main claim to fame, so to speak. And they may bring a lot of wisdom from the other ones, but they don't put it into a blender, and that's the problem. That's when misappropriation happens. They put it into a blender. I saw a vendor one time at a World Science Fiction Convention in Los Angeles several years ago, and I'm sure she meant well, and it was her outlook on life, but I overheard her talking to somebody who was at her booth, and she was saying, well, I've done this journey for over 30 years and looked at all these cultures, and I picked out this, and I picked out that, and I picked out that, and put them all together and kind of made her own religion. Okay, but that's not respecting the religion. I mean, when you remove something, I mean, it's like removing a body part. It literally is like that. It's taken it out of its context. It no longer has the same meaning. So what you think you got, you no longer have. There's lots more to it than that, but that's one basic value. So taking it and appreciating it is one thing. Understanding it, respecting it, putting it into a blender is what we see, and that's where we have a problem with that part of it. And creating this whole new thought process that doesn't truly honor and respect the original intent. And that's the difference. So it's okay to learn all that stuff or choose not to and just follow one. That's fine too. And our community wouldn't do it. I don't know about any other indigenous community, but if you go to a completely different one that's not in your genome, and they accept you, that's their choice. My community would not do that. You can't be Selenian. You can't be Totral Selenian. You just can't if you're not, unless you have lineage. You can become part of the community, but that's not the same thing. It's much more complicated because marriage counts, you know, because that's also very, going back thousands of years, when you married somebody, matriarchal system, they were brought in the community, you were part of the community. There wasn't no halvesies. There wasn't no step or adoption. You were part of that community. It's a modern paradigm construct that says you have to have the DNA. It's up to the community. And there's more to it. You have to have at least some, in some way, that the community says is part of ours. Like I said, that English kind of fails here, but it's really complicated. But going back to your question, you can honor all those parts on their own. They deserve, because we look at those things as living. So again, it's like taking a body part. Now you're going to take an arm from here and a leg from this person, and you know, a hip bone from somebody else, and kind of form a Frankenstein. That doesn't respect the original people, and it's kind of painful for them.
And tying in appropriation versus appreciation. You can appreciate the whole system, and it's kind of like what people have done to native cultures, like, ooh, I like dream catchers here, and ooh, I like the Chinoopa ceremony over there, and ooh, I like the sweat lodge over here, and ooh, I love the fur from Alaska, and therefore I'm in regalia of native peoples, and they don't even know anything about the history of them. And so it's the integral walk of, I appreciate this part of this culture that is part of my lineage, of which how I walk in this world today to represent it is I carry this, that is that truth, and I also know the suffrage, or I know the struggles and the challenges, and because I might be this many lineages and this many lines, how I reflect that in my day-to-day is, well, this earth-based spiritual practice is aligned with this, and with this one is over here, and this one is over here. And I ground myself knowing that I'm mixed, and I can't thoroughly walk the walk traditionally because the information isn't thoroughly there. However, I appreciate them, and I'm not going to profit off of them, and I'm not going to deliver this information to someone as an authentic master of it. Like, I'm really sick of this word like shaman. It's so disgusting. Did you know that just like there's a podiatrist and an oncologist and a psychologist and a pediatrician, all those are called doctors? Oh my gosh. Did you know that a non-native person traveled to the area of Siberia near the Sakha people, near the Ivank territory, of which that is where the first word, shaman, is from? So this whole Native American shamanism doesn't exist. Did you know that they're just doctors and healers and should be respected as such? So when people take their shamanic journey, so if y'all want to help me fight that fight, come talk to me, because I want to.
A little bit different take, it just occurred to me. It's a package deal when you take a culture, because you have to take the pain with it. You can't just take the good parts. And, you know, you have 16,000, 18,000, 20,000 years of culture and history you can take, and the last 250 years of intense pain. You have to take it together. And almost nobody wants that. Mm-hmm. And they don't bother. And so they it, because we view it as a living integral body that endured and experienced this, and so you have to take the whole thing. And if you're not of the lineage and of the community, you really can't. You can be an ally, but being Indian is okay. I wouldn't, there's good days and bad days. I mean, there was a time, especially when my dad was alive, where it was not a fun thing to be an Indian. Apparently it is now. It's much more popular. But because people have conveniently forgot the painful bad parts that they don't want, so they just discarded them. I mean, that's our education system, right? They don't talk about the genocide, that the physical genocide that happened for hundreds of years that reduced us down to 10 or less %, and they don't talk about the cultural genocide that's continuing right up till this very moment. They just talk about the headdress and the dream catcher and the cool little cocoon rattle they can purchase and pretend they're Indian. That's not why it's being sold, hopefully, but so you can be an Indian for a day, but it's a package deal. So again, if you're going to ally yourself, not become an Indian, but align yourself and be an ally to a Native community, you have to learn about that community. What the gentleman asked about what they can do, and that goes back to what I said. You have to do your homework and learn the entire package.
If any of you want to giggle about that, I highly recommend you look up Qualonot, Why White People Are So Funny. It's an Alaskan indigenous take of creating a documentary about white people. Because you know how you said, when you ever seen those documentaries, the black and white ones, where they have the native people, like, primitive native people do these things and do that. And they're a simple people, and they do this and do that. And when indigenous peoples of that territory were renamed, like, your new name is this number, it's a special number, it's a way we can help identify you, and it's good and it's honorable, and we're going to look at these strange things that you do, and what are these things that you're doing with them, and we're going to label them, we're going to say, this is like a special item. How many of y'all seen Black Panther? And do you remember the part where when they were in the museum? I love that scene, right in the museum, just calling out that who are you to be a master or talk about this item of this community when you don't really know shit about it. And you guys took it, you guys stole it and are presenting it like, this sacred item was known for this, that, and the other. Yeah, you don't even know that. But Qualonot, Why White People Are So Funny is freaking hilarious because they 100% flip the script. And they're saying the entire documentary in their own language. And the funny part is you could totally understand the humor in an entirely different language. And it's beautiful. So I just had to offer that giggle because it tied into the language, it tied it into the culture, it tied it into a little bit of the history. So I'm like, yeah. It is officially 10:10. I'm open for more questions because we could hang out. But I just wanted to let you know it's 10:10.
Does the record count here, Stan? The record, 11:30, does that count here in this room?
All right.
Okay, well, any more questions? Yes. The two things occurred to me as you were talking. First is that, maybe three. We know for thousands of years, and we're taught that singing is prayer. And we define, quote unquote, good singing in a very different way. So I'm sure the ancestors say your singing was fine because you were being heard. You were audible. So if you hold it in, that's a bad singer. If you hold it in, and we can't hear you, that's a bad singer. Everything else is pretty much good. And it kind of relates to, you said you use that C word, crazy. And I remember a story that happened in the late 19th century back east, where the BIA was, they stopped killing Indians and were trying to take care of them. So they built a hospital back east and were taking care of, the elderly and the sickly, and including those that had mental issues. And they built a sanatorium. And the BIA was giving a tour to a prominent elder about the facility, and they went through the whole hospital, including the sanatorium where they kept the mentally ill, supposedly. And at the end of it, the BIA was trying to get a good reaction from the elder, because the elder was very influential, and saying, well, we have this wonderful brand new facility. It's clean, nice, bright. We serve meals. And I say, so what'd you think? Especially I wanted to hear what you had to say about the sanatorium, where we're trying to comfort these people while they're here. And so what did you see? And he said, I see wise people. And to me, and so I'll give you the moral of that story is that redefine the terms. Don't accept as bare-faced truth what you're hearing. We had leadership and teachers, but we had those the word teaching. The process of teaching was very different. We shared knowledge. We didn't hammer it in. We didn't drill it in. We didn't inject it or pour it in. We shared knowledge, and then you either accepted it or didn't. And they often would share it in a way that you wouldn't get those easy answers where you could turn around and do, a true or false questionnaire or a multiple choice test. It was designed to make you think. And so you didn't get easy answers. You got more questions. In fact, if the teacher did it right, you would almost have to have more questions. If they didn't, if you were like, okay, I've got nothing I'm done now, I think I have it all figured out, well, then you have a bad teacher. So in terms of singing, or thought processes, or how you feel, they're perfectly valid for you. I'm convinced, I haven't even heard you yet, that you're a great singer. The first thing I would think of is you have to be clear within yourself about what's meaningful for you. And that's a long journey. It doesn't happen very quickly or easily or without some pain and suffering, at some level, especially in this world because of the blanket that's been thrown over us and bound us. We're bound within it. So you have to cut through it. And you're going to get some nicks and scars along the way. And then you look out and you find people that are on the same journey. And they may align with you and may not. It is trial and error, especially in this world, because the world is fighting against you forming community. They don't want you to be a community. They want you to be an easily manipulatable individual. So everything in our social construct, in my opinion, is fighting against you forming a bond with anybody.
And so that's a constant struggle. And in that midst of that struggle, you're still trying to find people you're compatible with. And it's trial and error. But I think what's helpful, that's where you wind up with people that have bad experiences because they weren't clear within themselves first. So the initial part may be a lonely journey. See, I mean, our ancestors didn't have to experience that because they had figured it out, tens and twenties of thousands of years ago. So they maintained that process. So kids grew up from the moment they were born within a construct and a social process that supported that. And that's not what exists now. It's dynamically opposed to it. So you have that on top as a fight on top of the fact of the difficulty of forming relationships with people that think like you. And of course, physically, we're not in the same place because it's much easier if you live in a village and have to figure out how to live with people, and relatives or not. Those relationships can happen. Now we have to work a lot harder. It is a lot harder to form those relationships. So when I kind of flippantly say form community, I realize how extremely difficult that is in the day and age. I'm saying is like if you really want to reach your full potential as an individual, it's within the context of the community, so you have to do that. It's not easy, it's necessary.
But also it's just a difficult conversation. Like, we may not agree. Like, I simplify things like, I really don't like chocolate chip mint ice cream. However, I'm not going to hate you or bash you for liking chocolate chip mint ice cream. However, if you impact my environment with only making chocolate chip mint ice cream available, if I host an event, I'll make sure it's there even though I don't like it. And the same goes, I would hope you would do the same. And so it's also the difficult conversations. What I notice, especially in today's like liberal progressive climate, it's easy to nitpick, to point out something that's wrong. Like, you're using a non-recyclable cup. I thought you're for the green environment, rah, rah, rah. Like the nitpickiness. And then you have the other side is like, you like beer, I like beer, let's get together, have some beer, let's talk about this common thing that we do, versus you're not walking the walk that you claim you are. And it's easier to point out all those hard things. And then if the miscommunication happens and then a second miscommunication on that, it's easier to be like, that's not healthy for me, I need to get away from it, versus, okay, this is trying, this is challenging, this is hard, intentional attempt to communicate, relationship build, and then if it's too detrimental to health and safety, then it shift away.
Relationships are scary. And that's why people don't do them well. Because it's not that they're difficult. Yes, they're difficult. But underneath that, they're scary because you're opening yourself up. That's what building a real relationship is about. You open yourself up to somebody else. Maybe a bunch of somebody else's. And that's scary because they're going to see you how you really are. And if you're not good with who you really are, you're going to sabotage yourself. And so it's not only the system fighting against you, it's you fighting against you because you've been taught that's not a good thing to do.
This is an all-panel question, but does anyone here feel that with the advent and uprise of social media, a platform that's designed to connect everyone is doing the exact opposite?
I'm a digital native because I was 88, I'm a millennial, and that's exactly what's happening. There's no long-term studies talking about the effects. We're seeing the next generation have less empathy, less interpersonal communication skills, and terrible, atrocious ways of validating, committing atrocious, well, I'm not going to say crimes, but actions towards other people. Not really accountable, detached, dissociative. And there's also beautiful things. New strangers, connecting with new strangers, able to fund and be of assistance to amazing people's messages being conveyed. We are having like, it's not activist fatigue, but it's something fatigue. It's fatigue of just being bombarded with so many messages, and we want to help and we want to do, and so we try and click and share and let people know, and we're building it, we're doing it, and the same thing with the likes and the clicking. Our neuroreceptors and serotonin and dopamine are getting spiked and depleted. And so it is detaching us, and we're forgetting. Noise, very smart. Recognizing that it's a tool or a toy, but the problem is because the generation above me that had, well, my mom had me previous before that, the general generation that had my generation didn't have technology and had the means to talk about it. And when my generation is being raised in it, we had to learn how to navigate it, work with it, utilize it, know what life was like before, not know what life was like before. I was, because I was off the grid. But there's limited sociological and psychological information available to help us. So now my generation's having kids, and we are like, well, I had to learn how to navigate it. It's like, no! Yeah. And it's frustrating.
I had a question, Dahr, your perspective when the first indigenous community you came upon, and maybe in the context of that question, did you see a dramatic difference in the way they interacted? Or were they already technologized by the time you got to them?
Well, it's answering that just in terms of, in the book, like St. Paul Island, I think there was 324 year-round residents literally on an island. And, of course, there was access to technology and social media and everything. But I think the short answer is that the more access to that technology and social media, not just access, but how many people were using it, however many hours a day, was directly related to how little community was there. So out there wasn't as heavy usage, and so essentially the community was relatively intact. I mean, there were problems, and I talk about them in the book, typical, isolation problems of alcoholism and things like that, which is PTSD symptoms, really. Probably more than that than social media. But I would say, I'm tired too, I'm probably not being as articulate, but there was less use of social media there, and there was more cohesiveness of the community and more adherence to the traditional, of the way things had always been done. And then in other places where there was more, not just access, but usage, then there was more disintegration in a literal sense of the term. Yeah, so, and, certainly it's funny, like this is a fascinating topic to me where on the one hand, the technology, just my own personal experience, I got into journalism. I didn't study journalism. I just went and did it. And I was able to do what I did because of the internet, and because I did an end run around all those systems that say you have to do X, Y, and Z to be a journalist. No, I just went out and did it. And thanks to technology for that. And now, actually, interestingly enough, after a 16-year career that, I want out, there's way too much information, way too much everything, knowing what the internet literally physically does to our brains also. And there's plenty of science behind that, is if you don't believe your own direct experience. And I want out. I just want more time talking to people one-on-one, or, going into communities and more time out in nature.
Tying into that, how he said the familiarity of a small community being having its own cultural and social norms, that is on all ends of the spectrum. There's bonds of community of good cultural norms, and then there's unhealthy ones. So imagine a trans individual in a kind of like podunk, honky-tonk type environment where the only solitude or safety is the internet, and then the strength to break free and leave hometown. So it is a beautiful space and a strange place. So I'm just trying to bring that other end of the spectrum into the thing, is recognizing that there's no positive or negative charge to culture of a society or civilization.
I think it's, in a sense, like inevitable, like climate change, that we're going to settle at a new level of intimacy, definition of intimacy and relationships. I don't think it's necessarily going to improve human condition and human society. I think it's going to detract from it personally. I think that's not just a simply old grumpy generational kind of determination. I think, but it may be what's needed, because what I saw for a number of generations, that the effect of us being forced to be individuals was we craved connection. We craved it, and we did all kinds of, and when people crave things, they do all kinds of wacky things to achieve what they think is that satisfies that hunger. And so I think you're seeing some of that with the internet, where they are in situations like that, really isolated, and the internet's the only portal they have to anything that gives them any relief from their pain and suffering. And so they're going to latch onto that, but they're going to latch onto it as truth. And all it is temporary pain relief. It's like putting dry ice on your burning wound. It might work for a couple of seconds. After that, you might want to think about it, and people aren't thinking about it. They're just continuing on because they are focused on the relief of the pain in that moment. But what I'm seeing is all kinds of other consequences. One of the most dramatic is how easily people accept what's being said on the internet without any thought process.
Fake news.
Or you're just on the, just on people making a statement, and either they're diametrically opposed to it, but most of the time they're kind of accepting of it, without even thinking about it, without any supporting documentation whatsoever. And that's how the political system has become as corrupt as it is, because they've mastered using that tool.
It's a struggle. Mushrooms.
Yeah, so, and he told me an interesting fact about him. He said that he recently lost most of his friends and is getting a divorce because he's so in depth with his work. And to me, that just kind of hurt to think, like, he's really caring about the earth and the environment so much to the point where he's losing his whole community. So it's just like, I guess the question I have to ask is, like, when do you know when to stop so you can take care of yourself?
When you find out, can you tell me?
Yes, I'll give you $20 for that ad.
Like tonight officially starts my 10-day shift. I am an entrepreneur, and I am focused on honoring truth and history, and I have a ton of haters who are saying you're just a limelight native. And I probably have negative spiritual energy of beings who are envious or jealous or frustrated with me, and I feel it. I'm getting a lot of love and support, and I've learned how to synthesize social environments like this to give me a ton of energy. But could you imagine I was an introvert when I was up until about 17 or 18? But in it, yeah.
And I knew her when she was that age. She was,
Yeah.
And so was I.
Right? I think this one probably has a very, I'm not going to say same, but similar environment of which, well, like Dr. Darrell Babe Wilson, his two twins told me that they didn't really like him growing up. Like they felt they were in competition with school. They were in competition, and it felt, and to them in those young years felt as though like dad cares more about school and education. In all actuality is keeping the lights on and providing food and doing the work, and as adults they love his legacy and are loving, caring adults. However, in that moment when they were younger, that was their truth, and it was real. And even to my own life, my detriments, like, yeah, there's social environments that are suffering, there's friendships that are suffering, and I'm like, but I'm compelled to do the work.
I think, Babe might be a good example, because he was kind of isolated from his community for all kinds of reasons we won't talk about here. Political, social, family, all kinds of reasons, but he was isolated. So the kids didn't have anybody else to turn to, and I think that's the thing that was different for me. My dad was pretty introverted, repressed, antisocial. I mean, he was suffering much more direct effects of the genocide. He was raised by grandparents that were born in the era when there were still laws in the books where you could be killed for your scalp, and the government would pay for it. So by the time he was born in 1924, that probably wasn't as much of a concern legally, but emotionally it still was. Yeah, it doesn't go away right away. And if there isn't enough information out there to tell you the world has changed, you're still going to believe in that old world. And there's lots of evidence to support you in that. But he had a community, though, that supported it. And by the time I came along, I had enough family that I understood, that the work he wasn't an activist, but he, was working, lots of hours to support his family. And I missed him, but I understood that. And I had a community that helps remind me and support me in that understanding. So it wasn't that Daryl did these things in a neglectful way. It is that he understood the long-term bigger picture for him, for his sons, and for his family, and for his people. And yeah, it was a sacrifice, and he made that willingly. And the community would hopefully then have surrounded him and helped support him. They eventually did, especially here in this community. They adopted Daryl the last, decade of his life, and helped him quite a bit. It just didn't happen earlier. And that's why I say it's important to have a community, to people that you can rely on, that back you up, and that help you understand the reality of our world and your place in it and the effect it's going to have on you, and that it's still okay, because in the end, all we want is people to be there for us. There might be certain goals, and if we don't achieve them, if we shoot for them and we miss, what we really want is people to say it's okay. Because we're going to shoot and miss a lot. But we tried, and we want a community that's going to support us in doing that and be there for us when we miss, because then they're going to help us get up again and try again. And we'll do that for them as well.
And recognize that the systems that we're a part of, there's diverse ways to appreciate them, i.e. when people say, this is what a relationship looks like, or this is what a friendship looks like. A few friends have accused me, well, friends do X. Like if I'm your friend and I put effort or make time available to you, I'm sitting here like, yeah, well, there's another version of being my friend, and I call it parallel play. I can't go and just go hang out with someone and watch movies and binge out. There are times I do that, but when people are like, come hang out and let's just like veg, and I'm sitting here like, I got way too much, and I'm going to give myself anxiety hanging out, vegging out, even though I value our friendship and value this time. But if we parallel play, meaning I'm sharing time with you, we're sitting side by side, but you're working on your notepad and I'm working on this, or you're sweeping your room, like I will go shopping with you, I'll hang out with you doing your laundry, I'm going to be doing my thing and you do your thing, but we can share each other's time and appreciate each other. Or when I'm happy to know the friends and beings in my life who could appreciate saying, I know you're super busy and I'm greatly appreciative for the short amount of time that we get to share space together, and I'm happy to call you my friend in my community, even though we may only see each other like every 3 months or something. And to recognize that the system that we're familiar with, like from movies and media and what it has taught us of what relationships are, no, that is not a default. Like same thing with monogamy and religious institutional belief systems. That's not a default of what something can be. It's the consensual relationship of which you set as boundaries and settings and interactions of consenting ways that you show up in your community or in the work that you do. And so I try and warn people, like if I do have a partner, well, I do have many partners, I'm polyamorous, and I let them know, October and November are my really, really busy months. Please do not take it do not take it personally as if I'm trying to ignore you or not prioritize you in my life. Please know that these are my priorities and love me through it, and I will give love and attention and intention when I can. So please, I'm letting you know ahead of time, i.e. like when we know we're going to be working really hard for those who love us and care about us, we're trying to warn them. Because it's one thing to ambush someone saying like, oh, by the way, I have all this going on, versus, by the way, I have this going on, this may play a part in the future. Yeah.
So you were talking about community, and there's a lot of stuff thankfully going on in the Santa Cruz community where Extinction Rebellion has a lot of group meetings. Before that, the Grange was doing a lot of stuff regarding climate change. And I just wanted to let anyone know here, every single Sunday at the Blue Lagoon, we meet up from 3 to 5 just to talk about the climate emergency, sustainability, and solutions. And it's there as like a support group. It's like an open mic to where we share the mic, we network with each other, it's a potluck, and we're doing that every single Sunday just so more people can come and like learn from each other or team up to go do an environmental project or a cleanup or to gain information. And we've had some really intelligent speakers that are working on huge environmental projects and different things on the mic. And then we've also been broadcasting through Facebook Live to help reach additional people around the world. So if anybody ever wants
3 to 5 p.m. Blue Lagoon every Sunday.
And then we're trying to do it more community, so because there's just not enough. We need to be like supporting each other all the time and more often. It's like just
Yeah, Khalifa.
everything that's going on.
You wanted to remember her for that.
I think that's a great idea, to just, get involved. I mean, because we tend to be focused, like, mine is the cause. And there's lots of causes. So, yeah, the climate change is the overriding issue of our times, and maybe any times.
There's a lot of things to address climate change.
Yeah. And because for some people, that's just not their thing. That's okay. You need to do something, I think, to contribute to the community. And there's lots of other things, homelessness right now, let alone, climate change 20 years down the road when, the sea level will be up to here. Meantime, what about tomorrow? So, but there's also something else to it, just forming community. And I was mentioning...
He's mentioning this one is Caffeinia. They meet once a week, right? Once a week, and it's a building of community, and I think it's every Wednesday, and they're in the Menlo Park area, and they do very, very similar with storytelling and sharing of food, like coming together over food and storytelling and connection to community and building.
Yeah, so it's not action related in terms of having a specific topic or subject or something like climate change or homelessness. It's just, that's all it is, getting people together to share and build community so people won't feel so alone. And she was saying that it's actually started back east, or there's other places that do it. So I'd never heard of it before, and I looked into it. And there's other communities that are doing this across the United States and other parts of the world too, where they just, so people won't feel so isolated, they're forming up like a coffee klatch, and they're doing it in a formal place. So they have dinner. They sometimes have speakers, sometimes they don't. It's just getting together and sharing so people won't feel so alone. And that's probably the biggest illness we have, is that we feel so alone.
Lonely, I have nobody to call my own. Yeah, sorry. The delirium sets in. Oh, and by the way, I am recording this, so Gregg's audio has been captured. It'll be on my website someday soon. My little tidbit will be on there someday soon. But my hiccup is not having the content typed up. So if anybody does really honestly write the story about this, send it my way, because I will totally highlight your amazing writing skills and put it on the site, and then put the audio, and then find his bio if I can remember it, and find your bio, and bug Stan for tidbits of information, put it there, because I suck at writing, so I have to do the copy paste thing. Yeah.
In
Sure.
regards to the video,
Yes.
we made this announcement very early on when there were more people around, but because I didn't want to collect email and phone number and all that stuff, for those of you that are still here, I'm going to put up a banner on the CabrilloMesa.org page that will have the link to the video. So I'll definitely be sharing.
Yes. It'll be on my website too once I get it. So a link, and I'm just going to steal the video. Cabrillo Mesa banner will give you a link for this video. I highly recommend you share it with your people and have fun. And actually, if any of you can snip stuff up and add it and put it together, the capacity to allow this amazing being to have his little words, just his statements, and amazing being right here and his statements. Because that way, the intellectual property rights of the amazing beings that have been presented can then utilize their own story and then share it to the world. Then we could have our own little edited TED Talk.
You've actually been on Facebook Live this
Woot woot, send me the link.
Yeah, we went past that.
Right. Send it to me. Add me. I'm Kanyon Consulting L.L.C. I'm also Kanyon Sayers-Roods, because I have two personalities. I'm also CoyoteWoman's Creations, and I moderate about 50 pages and about 80 groups.
Yeah, you're more than just two people.
Yeah, social media. I've been posting on Instagram too right now. So I do all the things, and it's exhausting, and it's awesome, and it's fun. So if I can do all the things, I think some of us can be inspired to do some of the things. Right?
So is there any other questions?
Burning questions.
Sure.
So you mentioned Extinction Rebellion as far as a form of activism and doing stuff, and then you also mentioned social media, and then those are the only two forms that I had, but there's so much more stuff than that. I mean, there's, you can have banners and flyers and then posters.
And gifts.
Contacting people directly through the phone. depending on the t-shirt you wear and the logo on your hat, there's just a lot of different ways to reach people. We do chalk on the ground all the time where we write stuff with chalk. And I think that people are dependent on social media, but it is, since the algorithm kind of throws people off with the information that's getting to them, I think there's a lot of different ways. There's also flyers and going, speakings like this and stuff.
We have to find people's language.
Yes, and there's many different languages, and it's really beautiful to have that. I'm trying to find the name.
It's important to try to get all of those different ways we can reach people, not just social media and
Multifaceted approaches towards a sustainable future is very necessary. There is no industrial model. There is no blanket focal point. There is no generalist approach. It needs to be at home introspectively and then hit your closer community, your environment, your bioregion, and then you could have some generalist approaches, but those can only be in like consultation, not actual action. And it's really important that we approach these things in many fashions, and some of those that are strange and interesting, like imagine more gifts. Imagine indigenous gifts, like more order, pointing with your lips, or indigenous language. I'm just doing the indigenous theme, but I mean like ecosystem restoration, educational outreach. There's a native group on Instagram that writes facts, disgusting, horrible facts about the United States, and puts these stickers in these places. So literally goes to these spaces, puts a sticker on some of these signs, and it says like, did you know, and here's a factoid, like when it comes to like the forced sterilization of indigenous women around contraceptive history in this patriarchal system, or the legal scalping of indigenous peoples, $1.4 million in the 1850s to eradicate the California native, or these legitimate statistics, legitimate factoids, and just stick them everywhere. And it's like on a hello, my name is kind of card, a little sticker here and there, and I'm like, this is awesome, because you're learning tidbits of history that are different. Or any of you who are into technology, like GIS and app education. So imagine having a digital like museum-like experience, like this right here, right now. Like imagine if I was in Regalia and I told a story, and y'all recorded me with a 3D awesome, amazing camera, and then we created an app saying learn awesome, amazing historical factoids or occurrences in this place, but you had to be like geotagged, so you would walk into the door and be like, ping, guess what, there have been like 50 videos posted here, and here's the tags, and you're like, oh, I really want to learn about like maybe there's like a holographic type of image where all the tags are, and you're like, ting, I want to take that one, boom, shoo, I show up, I tell the story, and then I tell at the end of it, oh, by the way, this is a little Easter egg treasure hunt, go over there and you might be able to learn about something else over there. I really want to indigenize the internet so desperately, because when you think about indigenous insights and pedagogies, I really, really get frustrated with Google and the instant gratification model. The whole, hey, Google, how do I change a tire? Awesome, very helpful, very wonderful. But, hey, Google, tell me your sacred ceremonial song for your coming of age for your young women. Whoa, you're not even part of my clan. You're not even a woman. You're not supposed to know that knowledge, and that's not meant for that occurrence. Or maybe there's middle ground, like, can you tell me about this medicine that can help this issue because my daughter has this issue? Well, slow down. Are you building relationship with the community? Are you setting the right intentions, especially knowing about that medicine? Are you going to walk the good walk of recognizing if that medicine is right? And are you respecting the community of whose resources it is? And then, yes, your child may need it. Maybe you get a chance, but you have to go through these steps of protocol or an opportunity of slowing down, intentional of setting of place and recognizing it. And like, imagine, I said Ma Pititakawas in the beginning. Imagine after my talk, I kind of do a quiz of like, all right, so how many of y'all remember how to say people of this land in the Mutsun language? If you do, you get to pass go and you get to go to video number 2, 3, or 4. And people go, oh shit, I had to do work. I had to pay attention. I had to listen. All right, we'll watch it over. And then put the gems and the Easter eggs in the middle of it because it shows intentional work. So indigenizing the internet, another awesome idea that I really want to do. So Yeah, there's different approaches, though. I definitely appreciate them, from cold calling to knocking on doors to bridging communities, because I'm getting so tired of these like, I'm part of this collaborative, climate collaborative. They're like, so what does the community need? And all the brown people are like, well, for one, you're having this at a hotel during business hours. There's no child care. We all can't take time off. There's limited funding to support us. So, like, this is already very unattainable and very inaccessible. And you like, what are you doing to help the community? Are you offering childcare? Are you coming to our homes and having tea with us? Are you coming to the park to talk about these things? Are you helping the neurodivergent community members? Are you translating? Like, all of these things are access points, and we don't always recognize that, and it's hard. And like, I'm able-bodied, but for a good while I wasn't. My knee was hurting, and I'm just like, even stairs and some of these things is really hard. So, like, it's hard work. And I have sensitivity, actual scent sensitivity, but it's only intermittent, so I'm lucky. But I can I recognize that that ability. There's so many different things that allow spaces to be accessible or inaccessible. And then I desperately want to meet people who can help me, like, transcribe and translate different things, because translations would be great, and transcriptions for helping those with different abilities or lack of access from different, see, I'm trying to find the PC word, but you know what I mean. Abilities, inabilities. And I want to provide that for access, and also attempt to signal through that effort to remind other people to do the same. But I'm not at that, capacity building point. So, yeah, it's interesting. But I'm going to be heading to Bioneers, and then I'm going to be heading to SOCAP, and I'm going to all these interesting places, and I want to build community at all of them. And I want to connect with people, and I want to share stories, and I want to share conversations, because I learn from them, and I'm very appreciative to the beings I encounter, and I want to support and be in solidarity with community and highlight work. But I'm only human, so help is appreciated.
Only a single human at one place at one time.
I've spoken at the Grange a few times. Yeah. Like, I just got a reminder on Facebook. It said I was on stage at Bioneers 5 years ago, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I remember being on stage at Bioneers and seeing my Facebook post said, 2 years ago, you were here too again. I was like, okay. I'm like, I am a Bioneer. But I mean, it kind of makes me giggle that I would have not thought I would be doing this. Like, I as I started doing more things like this, I started recognizing, oh, you're going to probably be doing this a little more often. But I never, when people do the whole, what's your elevator pitch, or what are you going to be doing in 5 years and in 10 years? Yeah.
We'll figure out what I'm doing next week.
Right. When I was 21, I did not think I'd have my own business and do culture competency trainings. I knew I wanted to do, like, culture sharing and setting standards, because, like, I literally I still am talking about it. Oh, God. My mom, huh?
I was going to say, we're living out the idea of be careful what you ask for.
Right.
Because our elders, going back a couple of generations, all the way up to us, have been pounding on the door to, not to get self-gratification, but to have an effect on our community, so help our community survive by getting people to listen to us. And it's turned from famine to feast, to where, I get 1 or 2 requests to speak a year, and now I'm getting several a week, if not a couple a day.
Yeah.
Especially this time of year.
Yeah.
So I think on the 26th, I had 4 requests for speaking, and 3 places to be.
I have 3 places.
Not close to each other either.
Yeah, I'm in
so
Pacifica.
So now I
Richmond.
have to choose, and there's not enough of us able and willing to do this kind of work. So we're kind of a victim of our own success in a sense, but that's why we kind of run ourselves ragged, because it not because it absolutely is a part of our survival.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Read it to me.
I have a publisher called The New Press, and it's a book that's available just like all books today, Kindle, Audible, physical. Yeah, so the usual suspects.
Imagine Facebook reading and storytelling together, like Facebook live feed of someone reading the book. I would so jump on that. Sorry.
No, I'm not.
I just wanted to say thank you for your time, your energy, and what you had to say. Like you said, you guys were so inspiring. So thank you for taking the time to be here and going over. Like, this is great. And like, I feel I'm still going for the record.
Right, I'm like, we're almost going to break the record. We'll break the record. Woo, woo. Definitely happy about that. So when did you leave last time?
Oh, last week?
Yeah.
11:15.
11
Record's 11:30.
I don't know if I could last. My happy tail gets to go to.
Well,
Right.
I have to. Yeah, I have to.
Well, technically, what time did you come to the class? Started at what time?
6.
So technically, you were across the street at 5.
Yeah.
Actually, you were there at 4 something.
Right.
So you're technically in this zone, in this territory earlier. But we've done that. Like,
And then I have to get. I have to go to San Rafael tonight.
I know. I was thinking about that too. I'm like, do I go to San Jose or do I go to San Rafael? San Jose, San Rafael. Don't know. What was it? You and I closed. We went. We have debrief meetings, informal debrief meetings. So we went to Sweet Tomatoes at 1 p.m. Did you know that the place closes at 9 and we closed it down? Yeah, we smelled amazing dinner. We had an amazing lunch, and amazing dinner. We still had nibbles, but it was awesome. And that's what we do all the time.
We close. Yeah.
We close it down.
Yeah, it closed at 9. We left at 9:30.
Yes.
Half an hour to get us out of there.
And it happens. But we get awesome, amazing ideas. And it's frustrating because, like, we did that meeting, like, what, almost 2 years ago now, or a year now? Yeah. And we had some awesome ideas that still haven't happened. Yeah. But we like to see them happen. Like, when I was on that trajectory real quick, Kanyon Consulting, it was created because I wanted to do cultural competency trainings and train the trainers and teach the teachers, all kind of conversation like that. However, when my mom had me monitor sacred sites and cultural resources around NAGPRA, Native American Graves and Repatriation Act, and CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act, Native Americans can monitor sites that could have their ancestral remains and or cultural resources that will inevitably or possibly be impacted by these agencies and organizations. Now, I remember saying, you know what would be great? The biologists come here and they have a little signature and a little paper and a little pamphlet and a sticker to put on the hard hat, a little quick training, a little guide that you become familiar with the price, the fines, and you signed your name saying you listened, you heard, you got the quick training. And then the same thing with the archaeologists. They have their spiel in the beginning. And of course the native gets an opportunity to say, you are on this native land, and it's really important that we recognize that. However, I'm like, wouldn't it be great if we had the little pamphlet and the little signature of signing on the date and the signature and the acknowledgement and a little sticker? I still want to do that. I've been talking about it for a decade. Gosh, dang it. Because I look so young, yes. Oh, yes. I get away with it.
But she started when she was 6, because I remember when she was 6.
Yeah, I've been in this. Well, Daryl gave me Little Coyote.
That's right. Yeah, it's Daryl's fault
now. So how many of you came willingly or from your classrooms? Like teachers told you to come. Teacher told you to come to class? And then how many willingly? Sweet. Well, the room was more full, but that's kind of awesome. So definitely wonderful, because sometimes some of these things are only fed by teachers saying you got to go. So it's a beautiful occurrence when it's popular enough for a community to desire the willingness to come. And so, yeah.
I think we're going to close it out.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone. You're amazing and wonderful. Deep appreciations. Oh, to you. 2 hours and 31 minutes since I started talking.